things are pretty crazy out there right now. Everyone seems to be stuck on quarantine. Social distancing is the new normal. And in China, the divorce rate is actually so bad, it's causing record-breaking numbers. That's funny, but it's not a joke. So anyway, I thought with all this free time on our hands, what better way for us to be able to look back and put things in perspective than by counting down the 10 worst plagues, epidemics, and pandemics that have ever taken place in this country. Because calm down, it's all in your mind, you're going to be just... I think I gotta call my doctor. The Asian flu, originating in China, hence the name, right?
Who's a moron? You're a moron!
Was a strain of the H2N2 influenza virus that we all know so well. First reported in Singapore in 1957, it soon spread worldwide, reaching the United States by that summer.
It's going to be one of the best summers we've ever had.
The silver lining, if there is any, is the fact that this is considered to be the most passive flu outbreak of all three.
Literally means nothing to me.
Sufferers usually experience a mild cold, fevers, but in some cases it was actually severe enough to cause pneumonia.
That escalated quickly.
With people around the globe being affected, it actually claimed 1.1 million deaths according to the Center for Disease Control's records. But some people actually put the real number as high as 4 million deaths. There have been 7 different cases of cholera outbreaks in recorded history. The third and the one we're talking about is by far the most deadly. Originating in India, it soon spread very rapidly with the help of the Ganges River.
Someone tapped the tainted water supply!
Reaching Africa, Asia, Europe, and finally the United States, it ravaged people, giving them rice water-like diarrhea, vomiting, palpitations in their heart, dry hands, dry mouth, and dehydration, to name a few symptoms. Lasting 8 years, the cholera epidemic was only stopped because English physician John Snow was able to map out all the reported cases and realize that they were all in concentrations around water pumps. Once they took the water pump handles off, cholera slowly began to go away.
About time for me to be hitting the old dusty trail.
So in 430 BC, let me tell you, Greece was a big mess.
Tell me more, tell me more.
During the Peloponnesian Wars, when Athens and Sparta were vying for complete control of Greece, the Spartan soldiers actually contracted an unknown pathogen, and while they were warring with Athens and broke down the city walls, they actually spread it to the entire Athenian population. As a result, 2/3 of Athens' population perished very quickly. Historians of the time recorded people having thirst, bloody throats and tongues, rashes, and other things. Based on the symptoms that have been documented, today's historians say that it was most likely typhoid fever, but there's no way to be sure.
Nobody can be sure.
So not only were the Spartans superior fighters, looks like they had an unknown advantage too. The Cocolisi epidemic was the result of New World pathogens brought by the Spanish to Mexico in 1554, obliterating the indigenous population by 7 to 17 million people in the highlands of Mexico. They never stood a chance. According to historical documents, we don't exactly know what the pathogen was, but its symptoms were very similar to Ebola, plus a darkened tongue, jaundice, and neck nodules.
Sounds like my Friday night. Oh, shut up, Seth.
Compounding matters to make it worse was the fact that, from studying tree rings,
Nerd alert!
historians have been able to ascertain the fact that this epidemic was taking place at the same time that the worst drought North America had experienced in over 500 years. Striking in 1918, the Great Flu, also known as the Spanish flu, is and was the most severe flu outbreak ever seen.
Worst episode ever.
A strain of the H1N1 influenza virus, it was first detected in the US military, and who knows where they got it. The amazing thing about this flu is that it affected 1/3 of the entire world's population. And the more confounding thing about it was the fact that it had the highest mortality rate with people from 20 to 40 years old, which usually isn't the case.
No, of course not.
Still even more surprising is the fact that this flu, claiming 20 to 50 million people, actually took more people's lives than World War I, which had just ended recently. The plague of Justinian originated in Egypt and was brought back to the Byzantine Empire in 1541 by flea-infested rats upon merchant trading ships.
Rats.
savaging the Byzantine capital of Constantinople, along with all other major port cities on the Mediterranean Sea. This plague only lasted for 1 year, but it had devastating effects.
Here we go.
Procopius, a historian of the time, calculated that about 5,000 people were losing their lives daily, and by the end of the year, about 30 to 50 million people had actually lost their lives to the same strain of bacteria that caused the Black Death.
Charming.
When Cortez and his men first landed in mainland Mexico,
Just smile and wave, boys.
the Aztec nation totaled an impressive 16 million citizens. However, it didn't take that long before New World diseases like smallpox began burning through them like wildfire. For example, within just 2 weeks, the impressive Aztec capital Tenochtitlan, which boasted about 200,000 citizens, was decimated by about 90%. All in all, it's believed that about 5 to 8 million people lost their lives. And in tandem with the Coco-Leachie epidemic, so many indigenous people died that it actually helped to reduce the carbon footprint, thereby changing the weather around the globe.
It's science.
The third plague epidemic, also known as the modern plague, started in 1855 China when a mining boom caused people to flood into China's different provinces in hopes of hitting it big.
How hard can it be?
Spreading to nearby India, the Indian government actually imposed such strict living conditions, it led to 2 different revolts in response to the government's laws. Now, despite the name the modern plague, it's actually the same strain of bacteria, Yersinia pestis, which has actually caused other plagues of the past.
I did not know that.
And just like other plagues of the past, unfortunately, this plague claimed 10 million people's lives. The Antonine Plague is the first recorded plague in history, and it was brought back to Rome by Roman soldiers in 165 AD after the siege of Seleucia.
I have absolutely no idea what's going on.
According to records, it may have been smallpox based on the symptoms, which included fever, black diarrhea, which suggests intestinal bleeding, swollen throat, and rash. Historians of the time speculated that as many as 2,000 people were losing their lives during the first siege of the plague. However, for the second siege of the plague, they estimated that it jumped up to 5,000 people every day. And with it all being said and done, 1/3 of Rome's entire population was wiped out by this plague. So it goes by many names: the Black Death, the Black Plague, and the Great Plague.
Let's wrap it up!
Whatever you call it, the Yersinia pestis outbreak that took place in 1334 originated in China. What is it with China? It's like if they're responsible for one more plague outbreak, they're going to get a free pretzel at Aunt Anne's.
Yeah, that's not funny.
Anyway, responsible for 100 to 175 million deaths conservatively, this plague took out 2/3 of Europe's population and effectively changed the course of human history. This is also the first place where we get quarantining, as they figured out that it took about 2 weeks for symptoms to manifest, so any boat that came into harbor had to dock and stay there for 2 weeks before they could be let off.
They should, those filthy beggars. They go from port to port.
Unfortunately, I don't think the rats obeyed this rule, and the plague spread anyway. This is also the first place where we get bring out your dead, when they would literally just throw dead bodies onto carts walking through the street because they didn't know what else to do with them. And a lesser known fact, not that it's a happy one, this is actually where we get the modern day description of the Grim Reaper, as people swore that out on the hills of England they could see very slender hooded figures waving around what looked to be sickles spreading said disease. I'm sure it's just lore. I'm positive it's just lore, but I thought you might like to know that for a silver lining. Alright guys, that's all I got for you this week. Hopefully now that things have been put in perspective, things out there don't seem as bad as they are. Humanity's come through a lot before, and I know we can get through whatever's coming next. As always, be sure to comment. Tell me what I'm doing right, tell me what I'm doing wrong. Maybe you can tell me something that I'm not doing I haven't even thought of. Be sure to subscribe if you like what I'm doing, right here. Hopefully with any luck, this video could go viral. Get it? Viral. But anyway, in all seriousness, continue to shine on, all you crazy diamonds. Until next week.